If you are 58 years old with $1 million sitting in your super account, it is tempting to think you have made it. That number gets treated like a finish line. But there is another number that matters just as much, and almost nobody puts it next to the balance. It is not $1 million, it is 7. 7 years. Retire at 60 instead of 67, and that same $1 million does not behave the same way. You are not just choosing 7 extra years of freedom. You are choosing to lose 7 years of government support, and that gap can cost you close to $5,000 a year in spendable income for the rest of your life. Nobody explains that when they show you the $1 million headline number, you have spent 30 years building this balance. You deserve the real math behind it, not the version that gets rounded off for a headline. Because $1 million at 60 is a completely different retirement than $1 million at 67, and $3 million comes with its own trap, and $5 million comes with a problem most people never see coming until it lands on their kids. I have watched people open their MyGov super statement and feel like they had hit the number, only to realize the number was never really the finish line. If you are in that 55 to 65 window and you want your number to actually match your retirement date, hit subscribe, because that is exactly what we break down every week here on Aussie Retirement with Bob. To understand why $1 million is not what it used to be, you first need to understand what I call the pension bridge. It is the mechanism that decides whether your balance carries you comfortably or leaves you stretching every dollar until the government finally starts paying its share. Retire at 60 with $1 million, and here is the number the headlines skip. A safe drive down to your 4% a year gives you $40,000. That is it. No top-up, no safety net, because the age pension does not start until 67. And at 60, you are 7 years away from qualifying for a single dollar of it. Whatever your super pays you between 60 and 67, that is your entire income. Now hold that $40,000 figure in your head, because it is about to change without your balance changing at all. Retire at 67 instead, with the exact same $1 million, and the same 4% drawdown still gives you $40,000. But now Centrelink steps in. Under the current assets test, a homeowner couple can hold assessable assets up to $499,000 and still receive the full pension, and a $1 million super balance still qualifies for a part pension on top of your drawdown, worth roughly $15,000 a year for a couple. Same balance, same withdrawal rate. Your income just went from $40,000 to $55,000 purely because of the date on your retirement, not the size of your nest egg. That is the pension bridge. Between preservation age and age pension age, your super has to act as 100% of your income. After that, it shifts into a top-up role, and the government starts carrying part of the load. Here is the trade-off almost nobody names out loud. Those 7 bridge years are not just 7 years of lower income. They come out of the front of your retirement while your balance is still large and still needs to grow. Draw $40,000 a year out of $1 million for 7 straight years with no pension support, and you have pulled close to $280,000 out of a balance that was supposed to be compounding, not shrinking. That money never gets the chance to grow again, and it is the real, invisible cost of retiring early on a balance built for a later date. This is also why the comfortable lifestyle figure you keep hearing about is misleading if you are 60. The ASFA comfortable standard sits at roughly $77,375 a year for a couple, but that figure assumes you are already 67 and already drawing a part pension. At 60, on the same $1 million, you are living on $40,000. That is about $37,000 short of comfortable every single year until the bridge closes. So what happens once you are not talking about $1 million anymore? Triple that balance to $3 million, and you would expect the pressure to disappear entirely. Instead, a different kind of cost just switched on, one that has nothing to do with the age pension at all. Now stretch that same story to $3 million, because at that level, the challenge is not the age pension anymore. It is a tax rule that came into effect from the 1st of July, 2026, called Division 296. Here is how it works. Once your total super balance passes $3 million, the earnings on the portion above that line get an extra 15% tax on top of what your fund already pays. It is not a tax on your whole balance, and it is not a tax on money sitting there untouched. It only applies to realized earnings, things like dividends, interest, rent, and gains you actually lock in by selling an asset. An earlier, more alarming version of this policy would have taxed paper gains you had not even banked yet. That version got dropped before it became law. What remains still bites, just less savagely than the early headlines suggested. Say your balance sits at $3,500,000. That is $500,000 above the threshold. If your fund grows by 6% in a year, that excess portion earns about $30,000. The extra 15% Division 296 tax on that amount comes to $4,500. And here is the part that catches people off guard. That bill often lands on you personally, outside the fund, not quietly deducted from your super balance the way ordinary fund tax is. I used to tell people to put as much as possible into super, because the tax treatment inside was almost always better than outside. I do not say that without a caveat anymore. With the $3 million threshold not indexed to inflation, more people are going to cross that line over time without ever changing their behavior, just because their balance kept growing the way it was supposed to. For some, the extra dollars belong somewhere else entirely. And here is the part that makes retiring at 60 with $3 million harder than retiring at 67 with the same balance. At 60, you have still got years of growth ahead of you before you even reach age pension age, which means more time for that balance to keep climbing past the threshold, and more years of Division 296 tax stacking up while you are also living off the fund. The trade-off shows up in how people structure things. Some keep $2,100,000, the current transfer balance cap, inside a tax-free pension account and manage the rest through other investment structures outside super, where the tax treatment is different and Division 296 does not apply. It is not a decision to make alone. It is a conversation for a licensed advisor, because the right structure depends on your total position, not just the headline balance. None of this makes $3 million a bad problem to have. It just means the balance stops behaving like a simple pile of savings and starts behaving like something that needs a proper structure around it, the same way a business needs a structure once it grows past a certain size. If $3 million is the tax trap, $5 million is a different problem altogether. And for the retiree sitting on that kind of balance, the biggest risk is not the tax office while they are alive. It is the tax bill waiting for their kids after they are gone. Now, the other end of the spectrum, $5 million. At that level, the age pension question barely matters, because a 4% drawdown alone gives you $200,000 a year, and you were never going to qualify for government support with a balance that size anyway. The risk at $5 million is not running out. It is what happens to the money after you are gone. Inside super, your balance is split into two parts, a tax-free component and a taxable component, and most retirees have no idea which one is bigger inside their own account. If you pass away and leave that balance to an adult child, the taxable component gets taxed on the way out at 15% plus the Medicare levy, so effectively 17%. For a lot of people who built their balance, mostly through employer contributions over a full career, the taxable component can sit at 80% or more of the total. Run that through a $5 million balance. 80% of that is $4 million in taxable component. Tax it at 17%, and your kids are facing a bill of roughly $680,000 just to receive money you already paid tax on once. Nobody plans for that number, because nobody puts it next to the "you are rich, you are fine" version of a $5 million retirement. Most people can find this split with one phone call to their fund, asking what portion of their balance is taxable versus tax-free. Yet very few ever ask. It is an easy thing to check, and it changes how you think about beneficiary nominations and the order in which you draw down your money in retirement. Here is where the size of the balance actually starts to matter, though. Picture a 20% market downturn, hitting both a $1 million retiree and a $5 million retiree in the same year. The $1 million retiree, especially one still inside the bridge, years with no pension support, feels it immediately, because every dollar drawn out during a downturn is a dollar that never gets the chance to recover. The $5 million retiree watches their balance fall to $4 million and keeps drawing the same income, because a sensible drawdown is based on the original balance and a few years of cash set aside outside the market, not on chasing whatever the balance happens to be this month. Same downturn, completely different experience, and it has nothing to do with luck. None of this is a reason to panic about a $5 million balance. It is a reason to talk about it out loud with the people who will inherit it. So the tax bill is not the first thing they learn about their own inheritance. We have now covered the big numbers, from $1 million up to $5 million. But what about the millions of Australians who do not have anywhere near $1 million saved? If that is your situation, the next part matters more than anything else in this video. If you are sitting there with $500,000 in super, feeling like everything in this video so far does not apply to you, stop for a second. You are the actual average Australian retiree. And if anything, the system rewards your position more than the headline balances we have just walked through. Here is the reframe worth sitting with. A $500,000 balance next to a paid-off home is not a shortfall. It is close to the sweet spot for how the age pension is designed to work. Under the current assets test, a homeowner couple can hold up to $499,000 in assessable assets and still receive the full pension, worth roughly $47,070 a year combined. A $500,000 super balance sits right on that edge, which means you are drawing your own income from super, while Centrelink is covering most, or all of the rest. Run the numbers. A 4% drawdown on $500,000 gives you $20,000. Add the pension on top, and you are at roughly $67,070 a year. Compare that to the ASFA comfortable standard of about $77,375 for a couple, and you are only around $10,000 short. On half the balance, the $1 million headline number gets all the attention for. I have sat with couples who felt embarrassed walking me through a $500,000 statement, apologizing for it like they had underperformed somehow. Then, we would run the same numbers for a friend of theirs with $1,200,000 a balance, too high to qualify for any pension at all, and the $500,000 couple was often taking home more. Not because they did anything wrong, because the system is built to top up the person with less, not reward the person with more. That does not mean $500,000 is effortless, or that the years leading up to it do not matter. It just means the number by itself is not the story. How it interacts with the pension is. It is worth sitting with that for a second, because most of the anxiety around retirement savings comes from comparing your own balance to a headline figure that was never built with your situation in mind. The $1 million number gets the attention. The $500,000 number, paired with a paid-off home and a proper understanding of the assets test can end up funding a very similar life. So, if $500,000 can work this well, and $1 million depends entirely on your retirement date, how do you actually find out where you sit? There are three things worth checking before you lock in a date. So here is where you actually start. Three checks, and you can do all of them without spending a cent. First, work out your gap years. Take 67 and subtract your planned retirement age. That number tells you exactly how many years your super has to carry your entire income on its own, with zero help from the age pension. If that number is 7, like our earlier example, that is 7 years of full self-funding you need to plan for, not guess at. Second, call your super fund and ask what portion of your balance is a taxable component versus a tax-free component. It takes one phone call and it directly affects how much your beneficiaries would owe if something happened to you, along with how you might structure withdrawals later on. Third, if your balance is approaching or has crossed $2,100,000, the current transfer balance cap, it is worth having a conversation with a licensed advisor about how the portion above that cap gets structured, because it cannot all sit inside the tax-free pension environment the way the rest of your balance can. These three checks take less than an hour combined, but most people go into retirement without ever doing them, not because they are lazy, but because nobody ever laid out exactly what to check. None of these steps require a big balance to matter. They require knowing your own numbers instead of borrowing someone else's. A $1 million headline means one thing at 60 and something completely different at 67. A $3 million balance carries a tax question. A $500,000 balance never will. And a $5 million balance protects your income while quietly building a tax bill for whoever inherits it. Retirement was never really about hitting a round number. It is about knowing what your specific number does, on your specific date, inside your specific circumstances. You have already done the hard part, spending decades putting money aside. The next part is just making sure that money knows what job it is supposed to do. That is the whole point of the pension bridge idea we started with. It is not a warning. It is simply a description of how the system actually works, so you can plan around it instead of being surprised by it halfway through retirement. If this helped you see your own balance differently, hit subscribe, because next week we are breaking down exactly how the age pension assets test works, so you know precisely where you sit before you lock in a retirement date.